Okay, shall we get started?
Yes, go for
Yeah.
it.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this is the second instalment of the Leeds Lockdown Legends. I'm Jill Ball, I'm Managing Partner for Mediaworks Leeds, and I'm joined today, we have Harry, who's a performer, writer, and all-round theatre maker. Say hello, Harry.
Hi.
So I'll just give everybody a little bit of context to today's session. So back in March, we all went into lockdown. Obviously, we all went through a lot of changes. You know, for some that has been a move to working from home, so smaller changes. I think for others, you know, when we look at businesses, there's been complete changes to their entire business models. So what we've been trying to do is catch up with different individuals from a range of different industries. Earlier in the week, we spoke to a restaurateur. We're catching up later on with a TV producer and director. So basically people that have done really great things in lockdown. They've taken a terrible, challenging situation and really turned that into an opportunity. So I think there's lots of interesting stories to be told, but also a lot of learnings that we can take away. So different perspectives and, like I say, how people have really pivoted and created an opportunity. So today we're speaking to Harry. Harry has really led the charge on lockdown entertainment. He was the instigator and performer at the Corona Arms. It could be that some of you had joined that throughout lockdown. And for those of you that didn't or who aren't aware of the Corona Arms, that was a virtual pub that was launched quite early on, really at the height of lockdown. So welcome, Harry.
Hi, nice to thank you for having me.
No worries. Do you want to start maybe by giving everybody a little bit of background, maybe a bit about your history and what you've been up to in lockdown?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I would kind of categorize that at this moment in time, like this year has been a massive transitional year for me. So obviously we've known each other and worked together for, you know, best part of a decade, I'm going to say, if not longer. So obviously I you know, have been working in marketing agency world for such a long time, kind of brand and digital for a really long time. And then at the end of last year, sort of came out of that situation, but before I came out with it, I kind of had kind of an urge over the last sort of like, you know, 5 years or so to kind of get back into doing creative. So actually I went and trained as a dancer, as that's what I did at university. I went to the Northern School of Dance in Leeds, and then a strange sort of sequence of events, as it is for everybody. You kind of make decisions that take you on a journey, and you find yourself in a situation that's slightly different than where you thought you were going. And I you know, and I ended up working in agency world, which was, you know, enormously challenging, enormously rewarding. I met some of the best people, you know, worked with some amazing brands up and down the country internationally, and had a great time doing it. And, you know, a lot of the people that I met during that time are, you know, friends for life. And that's something really special to take away from it. And I think what I realized, because I obviously went from the creative world into sort of, you know, creative adjacent, you know, you know, marketing is a sort of creative adjacent. Creativity exists as a sort of fundamental commodity within the sector. But I sort of, there was things that I could transfer and apply in terms of ways of thinking and ways of discipline. And also, I guess, you know, as working in client services, you are kind of performing. You are on. You're switched on. You know, the pitch situation is a performance. Being in a meeting with, you know, managing multiple agencies and multiple egos is a perform. You know, reading the room and knowing how to play those things. So there was loads of. In reality, there was loads of stuff that kind of transferred across, but then had a moment, shall I say, sort of maybe 5-6 years ago, where I just kind of was like, this isn't working, and there were various different things that converged that I realized gave me a little bit of perspective on what I was doing. I was like, I'm not functioning as best in this, and I'm expecting it to yield a different outcome. And so kind of went away and did some kind of work looking at what it is that I was missing for me. And part of that was realizing that I'd kind of put away a lot of the creative stuff with me as an artist, and was expecting my sort of day job to fulfill that. And actually, I really liked what I was doing as a day job, but it didn't fulfill all parts of me. So when it was like, right, I need to get back into doing creative stuff, I need to get back into that. And as a, I came from a performance background, so that's what I ended up doing. So kind of, at this point, I was too old and not flexible enough to be a dancer. There's a ceiling. There's a ceiling in it.
That's stupid sales.
Yeah, I was like, that I don't see that path for me now. So I ended up sort of stumbling into doing stand-up. So I started doing stand-up, I started writing comedy, and then got kind of, as it always is, you meet a person, then ended up making some part of a comedy theatre duo. So comedy double act really, with my comedy partner Jessie. So we've got a company called You Need Help. So we kind of started making just weird alternative comedy and putting on these nights, and kind of giving it a platform for other performers as well. So it was kind of really important. We wanted to do stuff. We wanted to make a space for other people who were doing weird stuff that maybe didn't quite fit into the comedy club scene as it was at that point. And people seemed to really like it. It was weird.
Yeah, I think, if you look back to 2019, you were starting to really see some success, weren't you? The last show that I came to, there was a couple of hundred people there. So it was really the start of something great.
Yeah, and it sort of like spiraled, and then we applied for part of the open call. So Leeds International Festival, that had been kind of running for a couple of years, did an open call for local performers, artists, makers, thinkers to submit suggestions for events. So we put like we'll put it in, we'll never get it, don't worry, we won't get the money, so we'll just put it in as like, it's like, the application was quite short, and they picked us, and we were like, oh Christ, now we've actually got to do this thing
to deliver.
And so we had an idea, and we sort of created this show, and it was like, it sold out for at the festival, and we got picked. We ended up on the cover of various different like kind of publications, and we ended up doing like the launch to the festival, and it sort of, that was a real kind of watershed moment I think for me and Jessie, but me particularly as an artist, to kind of go, oh, this is something that actually I'm quite good at, and people want from me, and I really enjoy doing it. So kind of at the end of last year, kind of obviously my work situation changed, and so took the plunge. I was like, right, now's the time to go, and I'm going to go freelance, and how do I transition from what I was doing in the sort of marketing agency world into a more full-time creative role? I don't think you can switch it off overnight. Like, that's just not how it works, but you kind of make degrees of change. So 2020 was going to be
the year, wasn't it? Then spring came.
Oh, so, God.
Obviously that, a surprise to everybody, but lockdown hit. But I think there's a real positive for you that came out of that. So obviously there was the Corona Arms story, and I think the journey, from that really began, didn't it, as a group of friends. Then it kind of got picked up by the local press, and then skip forward a couple of months later, we see you on the Russel Howard show. But also you raised a ton of money for charity. So I think that's a really interesting story, journey, and maybe sort of talk people through it, because there was lots of exciting things that happened. So I mean, like everybody, like, so in 2020 I had like multiple projects on. So I was meant to be doing a big another piece for Leeds International Festival, so an immersive show that was a much bigger scale. We were going to touring comedy festivals. I should have been at Edinburgh Fringe. I had another various other things. So this year it was like, it was all stacking up. I also had some freelance work, so it was all in play. And then as everyone experienced, it all sort of disappeared. And anyone in the sort of creative industries, particularly sort of arts and theatre, it just disappeared overnight. Yeah, it was really hit hard, wasn't it?
So I was a bit like, oh, I'm sort of free falling now.
Mm.
So I think like everyone, we kind of, when it all happened, we're like, right, we just need to get together and, you know, have a bit of
Help
community.
each other through it.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone's like, how do we manage this, and how do we respond to it, both in terms of work but also emotionally? And we just had, you know, it was just a Zoom call really with a bunch of like work, work friends.
Yeah, that was kind of week 1, week 2, wasn't it? I know people have been using Zoom, but it became a real part of your life every day, and messing around with backgrounds, and it was this new thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first one was before they announced lockdown, and then after the lockdown, I said, "Oh, we'll come back and I'll do a quiz," because, you know, essentially, I'm a performer, writer, and had no performance, so I was like, I can make this into something that kind of is.
You needed an outlet.
Exactly. Well, I was gigging a lot as well, and all the like I was doing improv gigs and stand-up gigs, so all that disappeared. So I was like, you know, what do you do if you're a performer and you've got no performance? So we did this. We did the first quiz was just us and people we knew. It was just like, I'll put a quiz on. But me being me, it was like full of wigs and costumes and props that I'd made because I had nothing else to do, and, you know, random rounds. And I think it was like that, it was probably that moment we went, oh, this is fun. We should maybe like let other people be part of it. And it got picked up by the Yorkshire Post in the first instance, which we were like, oh, this is funny, and nothing will ever come of it. Oh, we're in the Yorkshire Post. And then sort of almost like there was a bit of
it just really spiraled, didn't it, in a week?
Then it got picked up, and then I think it was when we ended up on Lad Bible, and that was the moment. I mean, because Lad Bible has such an enormous like viewership. That was the moment where, because we set up an Instagram page for it, and that was the moment where like the followers just started racking up.
Oh yeah.
We were like,
we've worked with Lad Bible. We've seen the impact on brands when you just get one article. You know, the level of reach and traffic that can drive to something.
Yeah. And I guess it sort of caught a bit of a zeitgeist that we weren't the only people doing that thing. But it's sort of people were looking for positive stories, news outlets for positive stories, people who were like, you know, making do with what they had and were building senses of community in a way that perhaps weren't there, or how they were. The pub is a place where people have a level of community and they engage with people. So it's like, how are we recreating that? It's such part of British culture, right? Yeah. So it seemed to sort of capture that moment, and then suddenly we got this massive following of like 7,000 followers, like practically overnight, and it sort of really grew, and it was really not engineered in any capacity. It did happen really organically, and I think so. At that point, we're like, well, what do we do? Because
we manage that? We then needed a plan, you know, and
we needed
digging out the publishing. You know, we needed publishing plan content. It was
I think they thought that because from my perspective, like the quiz was an opportunity to do something that I love to do, and that I perform and make characters and entertain. So it felt like that was the natural thing to give people access to, and then was the thing that was a mechanism with which we could then maybe raise some money, because we were like, we didn't need anything out of it, and also we felt there is a sense of responsibility when you suddenly got this massive viewership or people looking at you like, well, what do we do with this, and how do we do it in a way that feels ethical and authentic? So then the quiz just sort of happened, and and it got bigger and bigger, and each week we sort of raised money for charity, and we changed the charity. We changed the charities, and we wanted to kind of maybe raise money for charities that weren't, because everyone was suffering. So maybe the local people that weren't, like St George's Crypt was one, Greenwood Valley Far. We did Women's Aid. We raised money for Black Lives Matter as well, and so it perhaps raising money for charities that weren't going to get what they normally were getting, or perhaps weren't part of the conversation, and we just kept doing it each week, expecting no one to turn up, and then kept logging in from Madrid and New York,
It went global.
India, and like, and there were, and what was really lovely is that it like after maybe like 4 weeks, we did it in totality. We did for about 12 to 16 weeks. There was a couple of weeks where it didn't quite happen. But what we did, there were a bunch of regular people, like easily, that were coming back into the Zoom room, and we were doing it on Instagram Live, that were coming back all the time. And they were sending messages, they were engaging with each other. We tried as much as possible to make it as interactive, so that we'd do the quiz, but at the end of the quiz we'd do bits where we'd spotlight everybody, we'd like talk to people, we'd get everyone up and dancing. So it felt there was this, like, people were coming back all the time and loving it and sharing it with their friends, and that was really nice, because it wasn't it was about giving people a sort of escape and respite from the pandemic, and it was really interesting to see how it happened quite organically in a way that I think, as a marketer, it's something that we try to capture as brands. Like, that's the sort of thing that you try to kind of harness.
Yeah, there's a lot of brands that would kill for that sort of opportunity, but like you say, it kind of grew organically. There was no paid that was put behind it. These were just followers that came, off the back of the sort of articles and things like that.
We actually we talked about what should we do an ad, and then it was like, well, that doesn't feel it felt incongruous with what we were trying to do. And then the Russel Howard thing just kind of came out of the blue. I got contacted on Facebook by someone who was a researcher on the show, and she's like, "Oh, we really like what you're doing. Russell's doing this thing. Would you be interested?" And we were like, "Okay, well, this is something that it'll be a question. It won't go anywhere." And then, like, a week later, we were doing a quiz for Russel Howard and his mum.
His final show as well, wasn't it? Yeah, it's like his finale.
And they were like, "Oh, we're going to edit it." So it was like, it was quite hilarious, really. And him and his mum were really lovely, and we had a really good time. We filmed quite a bit, and then they edited the segment down. But we didn't know when they were going to do it, and then it ended up on like the season finale of his Russel Howard Home Time on Sky One, and there was like Mark Maron. Who runs like one of the biggest podcasts in the world, famous actor, on the same episode. It was just like this really weird thing that happened, but it felt like a really like nice sort of crescendo to the whole thing, because it was really about, like, we were just making a thing. It was a fun thing to do, and people really engaged with it. So yeah, it was. We made like over £7,000 for charity, which in reality was the most important thing.
It was.
And built a bit of a community. So and I got to perform once a week and make loads of stuff
Happy days. So that's the sort of the Corona Arm story. So if we talk, whilst we've got you, a bit more specifically about culture and what culture in quarantine has been like. You talked about some of the festivals there. I know that you had Edinburgh Festival lined up, there was Brighton Fringe, there was Leeds International Festival. All of those were cancelled. We know a lot of the theatres closed, so it feels like the arts were really hit hard through all of this. So I think it'd be good to sort of talk about then the role of digital and social and the role of that during lockdown. How has that helped arts and entertainment?
Do you know what I think in some ways there's been some pros and some cons. I've done a lot of like looking at how people are responding and how is arts and culture kind of managing it, because the live events have had to sort of stop and disappear. And what Corona Arms sort of made me realize is how much it's easy to use social as a broadcast channel, but actually how much you can build actual interactive community through it. And I think things that I've seen some really amazing stuff where people are using, interactive video in interesting ways, but working with artists to create things and then piecing that together into sort of immersive interactive video, things that you kind of tunnel down through. there's a company in Leeds that we created a one-to-one interactive SMS project where you kind of are buddied up with another audience member, but you interact solely through text messages with another audience member. And it's all about kind of generating a level of kind of connection and intimacy. So
Yeah.
I think what the positive thing, I think, is that what lockdown is sort of, everyone had the same stuff. It sort of democratized it. So everyone had a laptop, maybe with a camera. Maybe they'd got a ring light on Amazon before they all sold out.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it flattened it. So everyone
kind of a sort of level playing field, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which I think in some ways that, like, you know, creative people and creatives in agencies and artists, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. You find a way to navigate through it. And I think that it's been really interesting to see how people hack the technology, because the tech wasn't really up to scratch when it all happened. So how people hacking Zoom, how are people hacking those sorts of things to create interesting new experiences? Yeah. And it was really coming from the people. The people were doing it first. I guess the cons are really about how the limitations of digital tech in terms of I feel like we all know what it feels to feel Zoom exhaustion. Like, you can't read the room, you don't have the energy of the people in the room. So I think there's a challenge for tech companies, I think, and for brands and who are looking to engage with audiences. Kind of, how do you do that in a way that doesn't feel like it's depleting everyone's?
I think particularly as the performer, I think not having that two-way feedback is, I always fit, even through to like sports at the moment, you watch these stadiums and you're kind of playing to no one, and especially on stage, you know, not, like I say, being able to read the room, you know, not having the laughs, the claps, you know, I can imagine that's really difficult as a performer.
Yeah, it's like being in a pitch.
Yeah.
You kind of get a sense, don't you, how people are responding, even if they don't give you anything. And that is really important, because you know whether what you're doing is working or is resonating, and you don't get any of that. And I think that I think there's a massive opportunity to figure out, how does tech not replace that, but how does it complement, and how do you start to give better feedback and better interaction to make digital and social work in you know, everyone's using tech in the way that it exists now, but I think it can evolve, or it needs to evolve to enable more events, performance, interactive community stuff to happen. So I think there's something really interesting about how and how potentially artists could drive that, because they're the people that have that need. If you can't perform in a theatre, and the tech doesn't allow you to do that, someone has to innovate somewhere. So I think it's a really interesting time.
It will be interesting to see what happens over the next 6-12 months, because it doesn't feel like this is going away anytime soon. So it will be interesting to see some of those innovations and what's sort of launched over the next 12 months.
I think brand as well, like people need content. People, you know, TV wasn't filming for a while, you know, and is it even really filming as you know, prolifically as it was? As a brand, I think it's interesting to think about, well, what do you do if you're reliant on broadcast content? How can you pivot into doing stuff that feels more publishing in a media perspective? Because I guess what I mean is, people want to consume content, but they want but they were also, what we found from the Corona Arms is that they were looking for a level of authentic engagement. And people really, really wanted it. And it's really interesting to see how brands can match that need. Because I don't know if that's something that brands can do very easily, because it's with regulations and approvals, and harnessing something as authentic as the Corona Arms could be quite tricky. But I think the brands that can do it, or are set up to be able to produce a lot of interesting content, engaging content, could do really well, you know, as this progresses and if further lockdowns happen.
So it kind of feels like there'll always be this need for real world events, but you know, the live thing, I don't think that's going away, is it? It kind of feels like that is here to stay, but it's this sort of combination of the two that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, human creatures need to be around other humans. I think you can't. I think that's just I think it's a basic human desire. So I think live is always going to have to be a thing. But I think there's something really interesting in how technology and evolves to complement live and digital experience. And there's a lot of theatre companies and artists exploring digital, but not in a I think now is the time to kind of really think how the two things work together.
Yeah.
I think that, how does the virtual world and the real world blend into sort of creating bigger experiences? It's not just about watching something. It's not just about being in an audience. How does it kind of build the world? And I think that that's where, as a writer and story maker and stuff, that's where I think I get really excited. It's like, how can we use tech and live and social to kind of create these really big worlds that audiences are enveloped in, and that way they kind of feel part of the story.
Yeah, more immersive. And also kind of breaking down some of the barriers as well. I like the way that it does make the arts more accessible. It's not cheap sometimes going to the theatre. It's, like I say, some people have to be at home, so I like the way it has the potential to break down barriers and take the arts to a much bigger audience.
Scale is really good, and also accessibility, for people who can't leave the house, or venues, or vulnerable people, they're really important things to consider. I also think that it will help. I'm really interested in how digital tech can help people share skills as artists, I think one thing that I keep thinking about is how like brands and tech companies can engage with artists, and that conversation happening more, because there are creative people within agencies, there are artists within agencies, I'm sure there's artists within brands that maybe don't feel themselves that way, but I think I'm really interested in how it needs money. The development needs money, and it needs investment. People willing to take a chance. But I'd be really interested to see how brands and can engage directly with artists to kind of go, let's try something new and let's reinvent something, because artists have an inherent need to communicate and have those, can go off on those flights of fancy, but they don't have the infrastructure and they don't have the financial support. And I think that something that brands can sometimes struggle to harness is that sense of creative freedom and connecting into something really human. And I think that those partnerships, I think, could be really, really interesting. I'd be really interested in how brands engage with other artists to help them build content, or engage with artists, or build worlds beyond products, more full immersive brand worlds through live and digital. I think there's something really interesting there.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I suppose just to end, is there, well, maybe touch on your plans for the future, but is there any kind of thoughts that you want to leave with people today?
I mean, I have no idea what the future holds. I've got one project we're looking to try and turn. So it was meant to be an immersive project. So one thing we've got money in the project to try and turn it into a sort of, we're going to explore how to make that into a digital live thing. I'm really interested in drive-through. Like, there's been lots of people like exploring the kind of drive-through thing. So I'm really interested in how that can work. So I've got a couple of projects that I think will be interested. Like, I'm interested to see how they kind of evolve.
Yeah.
I think, like, about any sort of thoughts about how do we respond for the future. I think the things that I've learned through the Corona Arms and through this is one about just following an idea and not judging it too much. And I think that's really difficult for brands, because obviously that you're talking, there's a bottom line, but how can you explore things more creatively? How could brands, like I said, engage directly with artists and create a more creative collaboration? Because the art world and theatre world needs support, and because if you can't be in theatres, but how could the two things come together and engage and create something new and interesting? And I think, like, one thing I'm thinking about is how do if this all locks down again and it gets really tight, how do I respond as an artist? Like, what prep am I going to make? have I got thoughts about how I, not Corona Arms 2, but other ideas, or do I, be ready to bend in the wind? I think that's something really important, that because I don't think we're going back to how things were. I think
you're right. I think it's good, and good for brands, stay ahead of the game. This again, if this is 6 months, 9 months, it could be up and down for quite a while yet. So just maybe stay ahead of it, have plans that, because one thing we do know is during these times people will want positivity and escapism, and I think if that feels right for your brand, if you can find a role in people's lives in that way, that's a huge opportunity.
I think in a weird way, I feel really optimistic about how many new ideas are going to come out of this process from all different ones, maybe from places that we had no idea they were going to come from. So I feel like in a weird way, I feel really excited about that. And I think, if you can't behave how you always behave, you have to find a new path through it. So I know that there's lots of terrible news, but I think there is hope, and there is a sense of optimism in the idea that, okay, well, we don't know what's going to happen, but could something amazing could come out of this that completely shifts how we all engage with each other. And I think that makes me feel quite excited as an artist and creative person.
Well, on that positive note, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of learnings that we can take away from that. I think it has been interesting, all of these webinars, because I think it's quite refreshing to get different perspectives, from different people and again, how we can kind of approach marketing in different ways, and talking about things like social engagement today. So, I think I feel quite inspired to maybe approach things a bit differently, and particularly, you talked a lot about the creative process and coming at that differently. So, and I think like we were saying there, it is a time people are at home a lot, they want to be entertained, we need to bring a bit of positivity. So and I do think it would be I hope that we start to see brands, and a lot of them are pursuing, trying to become creators and publishers, and I think you're right. I think engaging more with artists and talent, it does again feel like there's quite a sweet spot there, and an opportunity, to do something distinctive, but like you said, something that's quite authentic as well. And you've demonstrated that through the Corona Arms. So I think there's a heap of opportunities for brands out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so thank you.
No, thank you very much. That was not me just waffling, and
it was really interesting, and like I say, I think there's a lot that people can take away from that. So thank you for everybody who's listened today, and we'll put a podcast together and we'll get that up on our website if you want to listen again or share with other people. But thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Jill.
All right.
See you later.
Bye, Harry.